difficult questions do remain about Gaza's future, including whether Hamas will disarm and who will govern and help rebuild the territory. Our next guests share their perspectives on what is necessary for stability in Gaza as the war-torn area seeks a semblance of normalcy. Nadine Maenza is a leading voice for international religious freedom. She serves as co-chair of the International Religious Freedom Roundtable in Washington, D.C., and as chair of the Institute for Global Engagement. She joins us from her travels in Taiwan. Matti Friedman is a Jerusalem-based journalist and author. A former Associated Press correspondent in Jerusalem, Matti also previously served in the Israeli Defense Forces in the 1990s. He joins us from Jerusalem. Thank you both for being here. Matti, I want to begin with you. Paint the picture for how people are feeling in Israel this week following the release of the hostages.
It's certainly a feeling that has been quite unfamiliar to us for the past 2 years, which is a feeling of relief and I would say cautious optimism. The weather has changed here, both literally. Things have cooled down and the winter breezes have started to blow and the weather seems to have changed politically. The feeling here is that there isn't exactly jubilation about the future. There's certainly happiness about the return of 20 live Israeli hostages who were kept in tunnels in Gaza for 2 years. And there's a sense that this war that seemed to be endless, that seemed increasingly to many Israelis, I think, to be pointless, that has ended. And we can smell the possibilities of a better future. Israelis have been through so much not just in the past 2 years, but in the past, generations, that they know not to get carried away with optimism. Unfortunately, in the Middle East, the options are limited and they're rarely utopian. But I'm hoping both for us here in Israel and for our neighbors in Gaza and in the West Bank that we're at least looking at a period that will be quieter and safer for everyone concerned, and that I hope that it lasts,
Right.
5-10 years. I don't want to get carried away.
Absolutely. Nadine, President Donald Trump repeatedly touted the Abraham Accords in his Middle East trip earlier this week. Can you refresh our memory? What are the Abraham Accords and what is President Trump attempting to do by frequently recalling them?
Yeah, so they were a series of groundbreaking agreements brokered by the Trump administration during his first term. Normalizing relations between Israel and some Arab countries. I was able to attend the White House ceremony with the first Abraham Accord signing, which was between Israel, the UAE, and Bahrain in September of 2020. And then later, Morocco and Sudan also joined. And part of why these are so historic is they broke this decades of Arab consensus, really, that there would never be peace with Israel until there was a Palestinian state. And so, and no doubt, this strengthens deterrence against Iran is really the biggest foreign policy achievement of the first Trump administration.
Thank you for that reminder. Matti, looking ahead now, can you give us a sense of what comes next when it comes to military withdrawal in the beginning stages of rebuilding Gaza?
I've been a journalist in this part of the world for long enough to know that any prediction that I make will make me look very stupid within probably a week and certainly within a month. I think we're looking at a period of prolonged instability inside Gaza. What we've seen in the areas of Gaza that have been ceded by the Israeli military after the withdrawal in the past week, we've seen massacres of opponents of Hamas. We've seen a lot of settling of scores in a very violent fashion inside Gaza. So I think that it's quite important, and I think that there's a recognition that it's very important to get some kind of stabilizing force inside Gaza to allow things to at least begin to be rebuilt. There's a report over the past day or two that the rebuilding will begin in Rafah, which is a city in the very southern part of Gaza on the border with Egypt, which is quite tragically a good candidate for reconstruction because much of the city has been destroyed and it's not currently controlled by Hamas. So a lot is riding on what happens in the next few weeks. If Hamas is allowed to restore complete control in Gaza and eliminate all of its opponents, which it's trying to do right now as we speak, then it's going to be much harder to dislodge them in a month. If the international community whatever that is, if it moves quickly to stabilize Gaza, and if the Trump administration can make some decisive moves right now to kind of move things in a different direction, then we might see a prolonged process of reconstruction and a slow movement towards stability. Anyone expecting to see, a democratic, liberal government emerge in the Gaza Strip is going to be disappointed. But I think that the optimists among us might hope for a prolonged period of stability that will allow the very hard hit people in Gaza who've been through a tremendous amount over the past years to rebuild a semblance of normal life.
Holding on to that hope right now, absolutely. Nadine, what have these past 2 years been like specifically for Christians in the Holy Land? What is the state of Christianity there?
Well, with all the news of Iraq and Syria, the Christians dropping dramatically, and I spent a lot of time in both countries. We have 100,000 Christians left in Iraq, about 200,000 maybe in Syria. Most would expect that to be the same in Israel, but actually the Christian community has been growing in Israel, and that's due to the relatively stable environment where churches can operate freely. They have a freedom of worship, access to education, jobs, no discrimination for being Christians, a lot of support from the international community. But of course, in the Palestinian areas, that number has dropped drastically, especially in Gaza, where I believe we're close to 450 Christians left. So it says a lot about the conditions that actually Christianity is thriving in the Holy Land.
Wow. Matti,
parts of the Holy Land.
Right. Matti, you've written that the pro-Palestine activists who have been demanding an immediate ceasefire seem to be opposing this peace plan. Can you expand on that point?
It's been striking to see that the protest movement against Israel over the past 2 years, which has really rallied under the slogan ceasefire, and at the recent Academy Awards, you had all kinds of celebrities wearing pins saying ceasefire and stickers saying ceasefire, and President Trump seems quite incredibly to have negotiated a ceasefire. It's quite an amazing accomplishment, kind of wrangling everyone into this agreement that we're seeing over the past week. And suddenly all of these hundreds of thousands of people who've been rallying in cities across the West seem at best very quiet about the ceasefire, and at worst I'm quite unhappy that there's a ceasefire. And as someone who's observed this movement evolve over many years, it's quite clear to me that it was never about a ceasefire. It's about helping Israel's enemies defeat Israel. And at the beginning of the war, when it seemed that Israel had the upper hand, or certainly it had more international sympathy in the wake of October 7th, then it was very important to force a ceasefire so that Israel would not be able to defeat its enemies, in this case Hamas. And I think that hypocrisy has really been revealed over the past week. You've been calling for a ceasefire for 2 years. We have one. That's exactly what we have. Israel has agreed to it, which I think proves to anyone who is skeptical that this war has been, for most Israelis, almost entirely about rescuing the hostages. Why do we see that now? Because the hostages are home, at least all the live hostages, and Israel has agreed to a ceasefire. So the political script, I guess, and the anti-Israel movement has been disrupted by the events of the past week. In fact, for many anti-Israel activists, particularly in the West, the continuation of the war would be better. It suits their goals better. But of course, for the average Palestinian in Gaza who's dealing with incredible suffering that's been caused by Hamas and caused by Hamas's insistence on keeping the Israeli captives in the tunnels and not releasing them, for most people in Gaza, I imagine this ceasefire is a much needed relief. And I imagine that there's an increasing gap between real Palestinians on the ground and their Western supporters who have very little to do with reality the place in question.
Nadine, from your perspective, what will be essential for stability in the region? What will you be looking out for to that extent as the peace deal continues to unfold?
Well, the question is really, will Hamas follow the 20-point peace plan they agreed to? And of course, none of us are going to try to guess, but I do know that the whole Middle East is holding their breath. And I'm in Taiwan, and people here are watching with close anticipation. We all know peace is a good thing, and there's been a lot of suffering with this war, and we all want it to be over. Israel has done what it said it would do. It released all the prisoners before even getting back all of the bodies of the deceased. And at this point in time, Hamas has not returned it. In fact, I know that Israel Foreign Ministry just tweeted not long ago that their displeasure, saying we're only at the beginning of President Trump's 20-point plan, and Hamas is preventing us from progressing to the next phase. So the question will be really how will the President Trump and Israel take this, and will they disarm? We're so disappointed to see 7,000 Hamas militants come up from underground and start executing those they're calling collaborators and outlaws, and accusing them of working with Israel. To see that brutal violence posted on social media, asking the residents to come and watch, it's showing the face of who Hamas is and how brutal their rule has been, which is why Christians haven't been able to survive there. And frankly, a lot of people have left, have tried their best to leave Gaza, those that could, because this brutal violence, and it simply can't continue any longer. So the question will be, what will happen if Hamas isn't going to follow? I know the president has made some threats that he will disarm them if they don't disarm. So we're all going to have to watch and see what Hamas's next steps are.
Absolutely. And speaking of peace, Nadine, another question to you. Pope Leo will be making his first apostolic journey to Turkey and Lebanon later next month, with a focus on promoting unity and peace in the Middle East. Your thoughts on how significant that trip could be?
I was just in Lebanon a few weeks ago, and they are excited with anticipation. The president's office, all the different religious communities. This is such a crucial time for Lebanon and for the region to be able to look to the higher goals of peace and what it means to accept the human dignity of one another, even if we still have different political views, different religious views, how we can look at each other as one people. And I think that that's what the Pope can bring to the region. So this is a perfect time for him to come, and really looking forward to seeing the fruit of this trip.
Yeah. Matti, I have 1 minute left, but I do want to give you the last word. It was a joyful week as we watch those 20 live hostages return, but the agony does continue for families of deceased hostages who still wait for the bodies of their loved ones. How are they feeling in this moment?
I think that some of the families who have, as you said, deceased hostages still in Gaza are worried that they're going to be left behind, because everyone is so eager for a happy ending and people want to move on. And the story is not quite concluded as far as Israel is concerned. And it's not just that we have 15 or more bodies of our hostages that are still being held in Gaza. We have almost 2,000 fatalities in this war. There are people whose loved ones will never come home. I knew one, Hirsch Goldberg Poland, who's an American citizen who was kidnapped from a music festival and then murdered by Hamas in a tunnel last summer. I just spent a few hours with his mother today. And for them, of course, they're happy that the rest of the hostages have come home. They're happy to see this war end, but for them, the loss is permanent. And for the families of 2,000 Israelis, that's the case. So the tragedy is coming to a close, but I hope, but for many people in Israel and of course in Gaza, the pain is not going to go away.
No, absolutely not. Well, I thank you both for bringing your expertise to this discussion. Thank you for joining us.